Well, that was interesting. I guess doing live streams can sometimes challenge your hardware. My Acer Aspire 5 laptop that I use for streaming, which is it's really nice. Yes, it's a cheap laptop, but it's a well made laptop for the price. Um, Decided to just it's it literally just stopped. And rebooted, and there was no and I run Linux on my laptop, so there's nothing that should have interfered to or done made that happen. Battery's fine, but exciting stuff. Who knows? Could be a cosmic ray, could be a firmware bug. Who knows? But we're back, and let's see. Uh, let's see what we can do. So I'm gonna, as you know, or as I mentioned, haven't done very much live streaming. I'm hoping to do live streaming around topics that I like, and hopefully I'll find good people that like the same topics. And I have a weird mix. I like systems administration and infrastructure and computing and software development and DevOps and site reliability engineering. But I also like thinking about alternative economic systems and a socialist inspired history. I'm very interested in that stuff. And things like workers' cooperatives, big into that. So I hope to find people who want to chat about that stuff, are curious about that stuff. And let's see. Oh, I think did my earbuds die? I think my earbuds died. This is a day. This is a day. Okay, we got our earbuds back. So now I can hear. Very good. Okay. Um, so, um, I will probably be bouncing back and forth between. I'm streaming on Twitch and on YouTube, and I hope that my stream is actually live on YouTube as well. Let's see. Oh, weird. Okay, YouTube made this into a different title. That's not what I want. So let's change this to how do I do this? Sorry, guys. I'm going to be doing some of this by the seat of my pants because I this is a these are new things, new exciting stuff. But let me see if I can start this up a different way. Okay. Alrighty. Let's see. So hopefully that will be resolved. Stream is healthy. Good stuff. Okay. Let's see. So going to pop out this chat. Over here. Hope you guys don't mind that if there's anybody here, alrighty. Let's see if we can pop out this chat. All right, there's Twitch. Okay, so let's see. All right, here is what I've basically, let's get this set up here, terminal. This is basically what I'm thinking about for the agenda for today. Do let me know if there's anything else that, this is really an agenda for me. It's like I might as well, if there's things I need to do, I need to practice with DevOps, with computing in general, and some things that I need to practice for work, for client stuff, for my clients, and perhaps for, obviously they're going to be generic for the purposes of the live stream. And I figured I might as well do some of them live. What I'm going to do is, it's obviously, for me, it's going to go be a bit slower than how I would usually do things, and I'm also going to try to not make things magic as much as reasonable. And by magic, I mean where all of a sudden everything just works and everything just appears in front of you. I've heard from folks who are just getting into the field that, especially, those who are interested in getting into things like systems administration or DevOps. One of the more frustrating things is that people who have been in the field for a while, have some expertise, they just make it look easy, and they make it look like, oh, it's just pop everything up and everything works. I'm not going to be able to avoid all of that, but what I hope to do is also explain, okay, how did I get to this point? Especially if people have questions. I hope people ask questions or have comments, observations. I welcome those, and as long as folks are respectful. And I want to make sure that not only do I show you, hey, wow, I can do this, but also that the learning process, the thinking process, and behind it. I think that's probably more valuable than me just showing off like, hey, I can set up a Kubernetes cluster on my laptop. Like, well, that's great. It's good. I like it. It's fun. But it's also interesting to understand, okay, why do I do that? Why do I think these kind of things are interesting? And I'm happy. Since this is my stream, I'm not doing this for a boss. I'm happy to go on tangents, go in. One of the things I hate the most is when I hear someone say, I think we're gonna have to take that offline, and we're getting too deep in the weeds. I like the weeds. That's why I got into the career I did, is the weeds are fun. And figuring out which weeds are there, that's really exciting for me. May not be exciting for people who just want to use, have things just work. Nah, it's not interesting for them. It's kind of like, when you drive a car, do you really want to know how the ignition works? No, you just want to turn the key or push the button. So these streams are probably not going to be for any people who like to just push the button It's going to be like, hey, let's get into the weeds. Let's see if we can turn up. Let's see where we have problems. That's like, that's where also the fun is, or when we're throwing curves, or how we and then how we step through a problem solving process. Sometimes I might actually be getting into things where I don't solve the problem, and that's fine. I hope that we can have a good conversation around it, and have a better foundational understanding of computing from it. That's my hope. Of course, it could just be like you'll just see me scratching my head and saying, "Huh," but we'll see. I hope that's not the case, or I hope that's not the case too much. I would like to help people learn. Okay, so all right. So what is on this agenda? So we've got Minikube plus Grafana plus K9S. We've got Laravel, which is a weird thing I'm putting on here, but this is kind of just like a part of a destination. I have a client. I've not worked with Laravel before, but I have a client who is going to be using it, and I want to kick the tires on moving on deploying Laravel to Kubernetes. First, of course, on Minikube, but I want to see what I'm in for, and see what start kicking the tires on deploying it to Kubernetes. Now, Laravel is a PHP framework. I haven't done a lot of PHP stuff for a long time. I used to do a lot, but these days I typically don't use PHP as my backend language. It's fine. I'm not saying it's something that you shouldn't do. It's there's a lot of variety and choices, and many of the choices that you might make around languages, of course there's endless people fighting online arguing about it. It's kind of, I feel like it's kind of similar to the arguments like medieval monastic academia would argue how many angels are there on the head of a pin in European medieval academia, and how many angels are on the head of a pin. Endless debates about that, from what I understand. And does it really matter? And is it useful in everyday life? No, a programming language is primarily used for humans to be able to communicate with computers, and it also is for humans to be able to communicate with each other through the programming language. It's kind of a model for what you want out of the computer. So there is no better language other than the language that is best for the writers of the language and the project at hand. Obviously, like languages like Fortran may be better for mathematicians or scientists, or Julia may be good for data scientists. But Python is a general purpose language, but it's also obviously used for a lot of the amount of libraries in Python make the language almost secondary in terms of the choice. The language environment around it has some pressure to help to push people to decide whether to use a language or not. So that's an important point too about languages, is that the ecosystem around the language is often just as important as the language construct, the language syntax and grammar, and the language itself. So anyways, wow, already on a tangent. All right, so BTOP is a Jeff Geerling recently mentioned BTOP. He had a video about it, comparing different types of top. BTOP is really fun. I'm also actually, I'm going to add ATOP, and ATOP has history, but only if you configure it properly. So you have to do some configuration. If we have time, I'll configure it on my laptop, and see how nice TUI. see how far we get with enabling history on ATOP. Okay, so that's the agenda. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I just want to check in. Is the stream healthy? Stable. Great. Okay. And is the stream healthy over here? No. What's going on with the stream here? Ah, I see. Okay. YouTube, you're messing me up. So okay, I just wanted to change the title for YouTube. And there we go. So apparently I have been streaming, I hope, on YouTube. But yeah, so we'll see if that's working. Okay. All right, so we're on our agenda now. So let's see the best approach here. So, okay, one thing I'm going to do is just do a quick introduction to Minikube. So I'm going to bring up going to bring up the, just want to make sure that I have, okay. So just want to bring up a generic browser. There we go. All righty. Okay, so let me get back here to just got to bring up the browser and OBS. There we go. Transition over there. So, okay. So what do we have? Or what is Minikube? So Minikube is basically a application that facilitates creating a Kubernetes cluster in a on your local machine, your local desktop, your local laptop. You can quickly set up a cluster with just a few commands, and it has some advanced features as well. So you can add a bunch of different stuff, including, we're not going to necessarily do some of these things today, but you can add on CNIs like Cilium. You can also add on things like load balancers. You can have, you can use different container runtimes, which is, Cryo, Containerd, or Docker. And you can deploy as a virtual machine, a container, or on bare metal. I haven't done it on bare metal. I haven't done it as a container. I usually have used Kind for that. And it's possible that Minikube uses Kind under the hood. I don't know. It might be worth checking out at some point. And it also supports different versions of Kubernetes. So if you need to, for example, if you have a production cluster that is a few revisions behind what's currently released, you'll still be able to create a cluster locally that so you can test things to see with less variables, confounding variables like what thing you can test in a system that is like production or closer to production. So Minikube. There's a, just show you on the documentation here. There's it's got a handbook. There are also add-ons. So there's a plugin universe, an add-on universe in Minikube, and many are very active. It's also got some shortcuts for things that, especially when people are learning, that they need in Kubernetes, like adding the dashboard. I think it just has a very quick command. Yeah, just want Minikube dashboard, and then Minikube dashboard URL. So it has a lot of convenience commands for doing common tasks when you're working with a Kubernetes test environment. It even has commands for well, it's not really, the documentation shows you how to sort of compose arguments into a Minikube so that you can work with the Kubernetes, with the Minikube commands to manage images. Haven't done too much with this. Also, just FYI, I'll be using, if I have to use, anywhere it says Docker, I'll be using Podman instead. Podman is an alternative to Docker. Alrighty. So let's see. It doesn't. This is a major convenience. It can help you manage certs, SSL TLS certificates. All right. So there's a bunch of features in Minikube. I don't want to go too deep into them right now, because I basically want to show, want to get off the ground with Minikube, Grafana, and K9s. So what I'm using for Prometheus and Grafana is I'm actually going to be using a Kube Prometheus stack. Okay, this is a out of the box. Let me just make sure I'm doing the right one here. Yeah, so this is, Kube Prometheus stack is pretty much out of the box, gives you a curated, opinionated version or a installation of Grafana and Prometheus. It also prepared for adding applications to be added to Prometheus, which then will be added to Grafana. So it has hooks. They're not really hooks, but they're like, it has patterns that are easy to adopt to add new applications to your cluster and add monitoring and metrics and graphs display for your applications. So I just want to make sure that we're on the right page here. So go to the home page. Yeah, I think this is it. Updated 3 hours ago. Yep, this is very active. Notice it has 7,000 stars. And it has, didn't need to close that. So you see it's very active. So they just released version 68.4.5 on 4th of February 2025. So it's a very active project, and it has 166 issues. So let's let's judge the community's health. 676 closed, 166 open. So it may sound like a lot, but that's if it's a really popular project, you're going to have a lot of open issues for that particular for its repo. And closed are 676. That means that's good, and we can even look see like when was the last one. It was closed last month. Not a lot of speed on closing issues, but it is closing them. And I just use this as a kind of rule of thumb to measure the value of considering a project, like if it's the level of risk, and also the I almost wanted to say, well, it is the fun of interacting with the project. Is it going to be a fun community project, or is it really going to be something where it's like it's an individual that did it and they never, it's likely to become abandonware. And as most people under capitalism are, they don't, unless they're independently wealthy, they don't have time to work on open source projects on their free time, because they have no free time. So if it's an individual and they haven't been able to address it, it's likely that it may be abandoned. Although I will have to caveat that I have myself participated in projects where it looks like a project is really one person, and really what they need is some encouragement, and the encouragement can come in the form of a nicely written, polite bug report. So please give good bug reports. Learn how to talk to people properly, how to work with people who are volunteering their time, that are not paid to do things for you. It's a very different way of engaging with a person. It's not a transaction. It's an engagement. It's a collaboration. Even just writing a bug report is a collaboration. You're taking, and they can, if you do a good bug report, they can see value in that because they are actually able to better tailor their product for its users, their project for its users. And so it's very valuable when you give a good bug report, and you literally are creating the community. When we're talking about open source communities, that's a big part of the community is users who give good bug reports and respect the volunteers who create the software. Maybe also they become contributors themselves through documentation or code. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that I see many people who seem to not understand they haven't seemed to interact with volunteers, and they have a lot of arrogance around how they interact with open source developers. Unless you're paying them, they don't owe you anything. They really don't. They don't owe you anything. Now it is a mutual exchange. If you're giving work to them, you can start to expect respect back. But it's all unless someone's getting paid, it's a volunteer basis. Okay, so sorry. All right. So what are we seeing here? Okay, so on the Prometheus operator. So this thing, what does this include? It includes the Prometheus operator. It includes Prometheus, includes alert manager, includes Prometheus node exporter, Prometheus black box exporter, Prometheus adapter for Kubernetes metrics API, Kubernetes state metrics, and Grafana. Prerequisites. So let's read through it. Prerequisites are: you will need a Kubernetes cluster. That's it. By default, it is assumed that the kubelet uses token authentication and authorization, as otherwise Prometheus needs a client certificate which gives it full access to the kubelet rather than just the metrics. Token authentication and authorization allows more fine-grained and easier access control. This means the kubelet configuration must contain these flags. Authentication token webhook equals true. This flag enables that a service account token can be used to authenticate against the kubelet. This can also be enabled by setting the kubelet configuration value authentication webhook enabled to true. Authorization mode webhook. This flag enables that the kubelet will perform an RBAC request with the API to determine whether the requesting entity, Prometheus in this case, is allowed to access a resource in specific for this project, the /metrics endpoint. This can also be enabled by setting the kubelet configuration value authorization mode to webhook. This stack provides resource metrics by deploying the Prometheus adapter. This adapter is an extension API server, and Kubernetes needs to have this feature enabled. Otherwise, the adapter has no effect, but is still deployed. Okay, so this is the compatibility matrix. We will be using the latest. I'm not exactly sure which version of Kubernetes we'll be using in Minikube, but we'll see, because I'm not going to start to mess around too much with Minikube's defaults. I think one thing I might do though is I actually might upgrade Minikube locally. Just download the new the binary for the latest. And another thing that we're going to do. So we see here, look at that. We've got one command to just try it out. And I think we'll actually do that. And I'm going to make sure that this is disabled. It looks like it's a nice to have disabled. It's not mandatory, but I'll go ahead and disable that. So it should be private. It should be public. Just noticed on YouTube that this is. And well, just getting used to streaming. I'm going to put that in my notes. And I can, let's move that over so you can see what I'm doing with my notes here. Let's do fails for lift our sales. What the heck? So ensure that stream is marked public. Let's also ensure that YouTube stream is matched with scheduled title. Okay, that's some good ones. Okay. Okay, let's do Minikube delete. Let's just clear out everything. Okay. All right, so Minikube delete. And okay, so I'm gonna do this. Let's disable the metrics. Okay, I have to start the cluster first. Guess that's strange. Well, let's do this big command then. Let's start everything from this command. Oops. Yeah, it's annoying when people keep the $sign in there. Okay, let's decorate this a little bit. That won't work either. Shoot. Thought I could actually extend a command this way. A little rusty. All right. So what I'm going to do here is like we're going to actually start. I think this is an ancient version of. Let's see what the current Kubernetes version is. Let's do that. I'm actually gonna just remove the Kubernetes version specification. Okay, so my laptop has 32 gigs, so this should be fine. Let's go through the bootstrapper that they default to is kubeadm. Extra config is kubelet, so it's those configs that were mentioned in the the README for Kubernetes stack, and bind address is going to be the default address and the bind address. Okay, so let's give it a shot. Let's see how far we get. Great. Looks good so far. While that's cooking, I'm going to go back and check that table of compatible versions. So this is Kubernetes version 1.31. And apparently it is the main and release 14 of this Kubernetes stack is compatible with that version. Okay, so now I'm going to do something that's going to be interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and look at K9S. So I have K9S. K9S is a TUI, a terminal UI for interacting with Kubernetes. This is by default it lists the pods in the default namespace, but I'm gonna switch it to. Let me actually make the text a bit bigger here. so that the UI doesn't get upset. Let's see how. And let's see if I can make the proportions a little better. It's a little better. Okay. And if that ends up being too small, for, folks can let me know. All right. So I'm going to actually show all namespaces. So in all namespaces. So there we go. So it's a running cluster. So what is K9s? K9s is a UI. So you could have your web. You could have a web UI, right, to get into the into Kubernetes through the Kubernetes dashboard. Although it's rather limited in what it can show. You can also interact with Kubernetes, of course, directly through the API, which I wouldn't recommend for your sanity. You can also interact with kube control, which is a custom-made interface to the Kubernetes API. And there's other commands that also can interact with the Kubernetes API. K9s is just a nice ncurses-based terminal UI that really makes it convenient for those who like to use the shell or like to use a terminal. And I'm one of them. So in just to show off K9s a little bit, on these pods, you can see the status. You can do question mark to get a help page, show you the different keys and what their command is. And we're going to look at the logs. So I'm going to skip out of that. We're going to look at the logs for this particular pod. So this is core DNS, and you can do, I'm tapping page up and page down. You can look and see log entries. And we can also see, I think we can see events. Nope, that's edit. That's E. So where do we see events? Oh, events is actually events. So I have to hit colon or the colon key, and then I can actually enter in Kubernetes resources that I can actually look at. So in this case, I want to look at events. So here's all the events that are have been fired, and we can start to get some details on these. This is going to be obviously YAML, showing a variety of metadata about what's going on within Kubernetes. So this one was a leader election, and it's very useful to look at events. Although this can be a little confusing. It says that core DNS is unhealthy. Not sure if that has been resolved. Okay, this was scheduled. Seems all right. So this is the difference. Like, here's a describe and the actual YAML. Those are not actually, like, those are different things. Okay, so let's get back to, let's go to deployments. Let's take a look at deployments. We've got core DNS. Okay, so this is the thing that the event mentioned. It looks good. This is the pod that are part of this deployment. It's only one, and it looks good. And again, these are the same log entries we saw because we looked at that pod. We can see the log entries associated with that deployment as well, which is mostly going to be the same as the pod in this case, because there's only one pod. But it'll be slightly different because the deployment has different there's different goals with the deployment than just deploying an individual pod. especially keeping a pod alive, keeping a service alive. All right, and let's look at other daemon sets. Yes, there is kube proxy, and it's alive. Okay, so you can see a variety of features of K9s, and it's pretty slick. I recommend it. Okay, so now what we want to do is keep going with, let's take a look. Let's take a look at next steps with kube Prometheus operator. I think this is already disabled, but let's go ahead and do this ourselves just to make sure. I'm actually going to open up a new one. There we go. Okay, it's disabled. Okay. Okay, so let's see. I have some scripts that already help to access the web UIs for Prometheus and for Grafana within this, but I'm hoping I don't have to cheat, but let's see. I would like to actually see if we can just use the instructions that they give to get into those web UIs. So let's see here. Does this give us what we need? Prometheus, Grafana, and Alert Manager dashboards can be accessed quickly using kube control port forward after running the quick start via the commands below. Okay, so let's try that. Let's try first with Prometheus. And then we'll open up localhost and let's see if the magic happens. I'm going to do a simple copy here. So what are we doing? We're going to be doing, nope. We're going to be doing kube control and namespaces monitoring, port forward, service Prometheus Kates 9090. So let's see. Interesting. Already it's not happy. So let's see. Do we have a monitoring namespace? So let's list namespaces. We don't have a monitoring namespace. So there's already a difference between what the documentation says and what the quick start does. So it does not create a monitoring namespace. These are kind of things that might be useful to actually update the documentation ourselves. Actually, why don't I just put that into my notes? Put that in so All right, and let's just make sure that I'm not missing a step here. So, okay, this is going to be hard to search for. There's six of these. I have to remember I have to. Yeah, I don't think anything. Ah, in the quick start it does? Okay, I see. So the quick start it does, but in the Minikube start it does not. Okay, so it's more about the Minikube, uh, quick start is missing creating a namespace. And maybe that's an extra command in Minikube. But maybe I'll have to figure that out before I start telling them, hey, your documentation's wrong. But that's something worth investigating. Okay, so this is my notes so far. So I'm gonna make sure that this says Minikube section of the quick start doesn't create monitoring namespace expected by other docs. So I think everything is then in either the default or kube system. So we'll see if it's in default. I'll just take out the mention of default or of the monitoring namespace. Okay, so I saved my notes there. Yeah, I think that's probably it. Okay, so I'm just going to remove monitoring. And let's see if we can just more wrong. So let's look for services. Interesting. Interesting. So there's actually no, hang on a second. Minikube. I don't think this thing worked at all. So that's even more interesting. I see. It's actually 2 steps. It's 2 steps. Okay. No, I think this is a red herring. Okay, so what this is missing Okay, so actually what I need to do here is this is intended to be a library. So what I've done before, I'm going to just go into my old projects. Favorite kind, extras. I actually have, so Fun with Prometheus and Grafana. So this, I'm going to use Helm. Okay, so this is gonna get us there. was hoping that I could use this from the documentation, but I think it's just basically I need to make my own documentation. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm gonna, this is not something I can use directly. And I'm probably gonna need to make sure I have some things installed. Namespace monitor, port forward. All right. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to learn from my peers, and I'm going to actually make a gist with this information to get you going. So I'm going to put that in the gist, and it'll be linked to in the description below. And need to note that down because so I don't forget. Okay. Okay, some of this stuff does do some some of this did depend. So some of this I'm gonna have to do. I'm gonna just use this script as a partial recipe because this was built with kind in mind. So I want to use this with Minikube. So probably have to work through some of the differences there. But let's give it a shot. I'm gonna go back, get out of K9S, and let's configure Helm. So let's make sure I have Helm. All right, let's just check the version. Okay. Okay, great. Alrighty, and now let's do this big install and hope that this old command still works. Now I use install atomic here. You might notice that because I like that we can actually go over here. Let's get a new command or a new terminal. Let's take a look at what's happening here. Okay, we can see that a bunch of stuff is starting to be created, a bunch of pods. And it looks good so far. We created a new namespace monitor. We see Grafana, we see Prometheus, we see Alert Manager. Good stuff. I like that K9S also updates you on when things, like highlights things that have changed, because obviously in a cluster, an active cluster, things are changing all the time. So it puts a little delta symbol, the triangle, and also does color status, but it puts a little triangle to show, hey, something changed on this very recently. So trying to keep track of a running cluster. I mean, this would be very difficult in a cluster if you had thousands or tens of thousands of pods running at the same time. Although it does have mechanisms, if you use, this is that kind of scenarios requires administration and organization to be able to make sense of it all for a human, for an ordinary human. So of course you'd be making namespaces, and you'd be using labels, and you'd have ways of filtering so that you can not have to look at the entire cluster running in all of its complexity. You can narrowly scope what you're looking at. So, all right, so now we have this output, and we have my Prometheus stack was last deployed. It was namespace is monitored, status is deployed. Revision is 1. It's been installed. You can check its status. We don't need to do that. We can also get the admin user password, so it shows that, which is great. I think that's actually new, or new for me. It's been a while since I actually ran this operator and chart, and then access Grafana local instance. So this is great. This is great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run. Let's just do this to kick the tires. So we're gonna copy pasta this command. Yay. Okay, so that's looking good. We're also going to get the admin password. That's interesting. So let's do this. Let's with K9S, let's look for secrets. Interesting. So is there actually a secret named Prom Grafana? Doesn't look like it, does it? I'm going to think it's actually this one, the My Prometheus Stack Grafana. So let's take a look at that. Yes, there we go. Look at this. So in this secret, it's got admin password, admin user, and LDAP tool. Not sure what LDAP tool is, but admin user and admin password look very, very interesting. And so I'm going to do my best to target that. Look at that. That's interesting. So it's prom operator is the password. And let's okay, so let's plug that in. Oh, okay. Let's actually let's do this. I bet there's going to be some extra stuff we're going to need to let's just look at pod name. Okay, great. So let's do this next command. So kube control namespace monitor forward name 3000. All right, that's okay. Reading that right. Ah, interesting. So I don't have IPv6 enabled on my laptop. So I think that may be why this is having trouble. So let me take a look. Try 3001. Okay, great. So that works. All right, so we've got that working. Let's see. Let's go to our browser and go to localhost 3001. Sweet. Okay, I think I'm going to have to go back to my script and cheat a little bit more. Yeah, let's try this one. So that's 9090. So let's go to 9090. Do we see? Hey, alrighty, we got Prometheus. I guess they haven't updated the documentation very much on this, but also it could be maybe I have a local configuration that's odd, but just because I have IPv6 disabled shouldn't mean that it fails from commands that are issued from the Helm chart. So, hey, there's some things that I can hopefully help the project with by creating smoother paths for the quick start. Okay, so this is Prometheus. We can see here there's no data queried yet. Although I think What I'm actually more interested in is Grafana. Yeah, so let's do the second one. It's going to go to 3000 to port 80. What's already on 3000? Take a quick divergence here. Yes, I'm running as root on my laptop, but let's see if we can see what's on 3000. I already have Grafana running on my local machine. It's doing my local performance monitoring. So I'm going to need to open a different port with this. So instead of using 3000, I'm going to do 3. Let's just check and see. Is 3001 open? Yeah, there's nothing listening there. So let's do 3001. And let's see if 3001, yay! And so we already have the secret. It is actually prom operator. So admin and prom operator should do it. So let's see, admin, prom operator. Big money, no whammies. Yay! Okay, so let me just make sure that I'm showing you guys what I'm seeing here. So let's transition. Fantastic. So we have a welcome to Grafana. And let's remove this panel. Look at all this. Okay, so these are the dashboards that are available out of the box. So we've got Alert Manager, Core DNS, etcd, Grafana Overview. Let's see what Grafana Overview has. Look at that. We've got some charts. And let me just check and see that you guys are seeing what I hope you're seeing. Looks okay. And fantastic. Okay. So charts are popping. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these other charts. Oh, look at that, Node Exporter. Node Exporter has lots of pretty charts. Memory usage, CPU usage, load average, network, transmissions received, all kinds of good stuff. It would have different addresses, but it doesn't have. I think Minikube by default just has one node. Actually, let me check that. How would I check that? Let's go back to the terminal. I want to check. And what am I doing? I'm checking to see if nodes. I want to look at nodes. Yeah, so there's only one node in Minikube. You can make other nodes. I just want to be clear. You can make other nodes. You can make a cluster that has multiple nodes. You can also make multiple clusters that are separate. And it's especially useful for when you're doing cluster-to-cluster communication troubleshooting. Or, like if you have an application in one cluster that the other cluster depends on, like if you're doing something like HashiCorp Vault and you want to have a Vault-oriented cluster and you have another cluster that's actually got your applications, your main workload, then it's very useful to use Minikube on a box that has enough RAM. My laptop has 32 gigs of RAM. That's a good amount for a lot of testing. That'll get you pretty far. Minikube can create multiple clusters and can help you to troubleshoot issues that you might find difficult to troubleshoot in other ways. By recreating, I'm a big fan of doing your best to create as much of a production-like environment locally as possible. It's one of the reasons I love running Linux as my main desktop, is because the things I learn on my main desktop, I learn they can be, the things I learn on my main desktop can be applied to work. And the things I learn at work, I can also apply at home. It's very nice. And since Linux is like the most ubiquitous server platform, as long as I'm working on computing infrastructures, I will have a lot of help to be a good Linux desktop user. Okay, so let's go back to the graph. So there's, I mean, this is pretty much it. As far as like my first part of my agenda, I think. We've got, of course, you want to, you can configure things within Grafana. You can make a new dedicated dashboard that consolidates the things you're interested in. Let's see if we got a Prometheus overview. Look at that. We've got discovery, target sync, samples, how many samples, blah, blah, blah. And I think this is the same. Yeah, that's the same. And then, do we have any alerts? Oh, we do have alerts. So I don't think there's, yeah, there's, oh, there are. Okay, there's no active alert notification. Let's see, alert manager. Okay, wait. We do have namespace. There's 3 alerts. Okay, so we have alerts here. So we have etcd. So interesting. etcd targets and kube system namespace are down. Kube etcd members are down. So let's see. Let's go check that in. Oh, I see. Okay, so I think etcd needs to have 1 or 3 instances, because I think it uses Raft as its consensus protocol for cluster health. And I think it has to always be, does it have to be a prime number? No. It has to have an odd number of members to reach consensus, I think. Something like that. I might have to look up the definition on Raft. It's been a while. But let's check out in K9S if these alerts are bogus. All right, I'm not seeing. etcd looks healthy. Okay, yeah, it's running in a, so we can see from these, let's do a wrap here. So running HTTP and gRPC server on single port, this is not recommended for production. So it's got some warnings because this is not production. This is a Minikube instance on my laptop, and we're only running a control plane and worker combination. So yeah, this is not ideal. It's not production ready for STD, so that makes sense. So yeah. All right, so let's go back. Let's go back to our agenda. Let's put this back on some more interesting. Okay. Yeah, and you can see on this column, there's only one. It's Minikube, one node. It's just a control plane and worker. All right, so let's go back. Okay, actually, sorry, this is where I want to be. All right, so this first part is, we got that agenda. Let's check the time. It's about 2:27 my time. Hey. I got a chat. Let's see. Great. So yes, yes, Sierra Adams, I'm reading the chat. Thanks for being my first chat on Twitch. So welcome. Please do chime in if you have things that you want to see. I'm just doing random stuff. And DevOpsy, Socialisty, Workers Cooperative. It's got to be random, and obviously some things I'm gonna have to, I'm not an oracle, but I'm happy to dive into things and learn together. What's the next thing? So I'm not sure if I want to do Laravel today. I think I might just want to dive into, why not? Let's see how far we can get. Let's see how far we can get. Okay. So Laravel. So let me just quickly. So I found this link the other day when I was looking for Laravel stuff, and I'm gonna so I found these links for a link to the Learn Kate's website for using Laravel in, or just, it's basically a quick start on Laravel in Kubernetes. It's pretty ancient. Hasn't been updated since 2020, 2021, maybe around there. So a lot of things, it may not work, but I'm interested to see how far I can get in getting Laravel up, and see if it's possible without a lot of work. Can I still be lazy, or will I need to do a lot more legwork to get Laravel up? As I mentioned earlier, like this is sort of preliminary exploration for me for work that a client needs to deploy a Laravel instance in an automated fashion. And I've not worked with Laravel before. I've worked with PHP apps before, but I've never worked with PHP apps in a Kubernetes context. I did do my research. I saw that, hey, you can containerize PHP apps. Laravel can also be containerized. I mean, you could containerize anything. Of course, there's always the question on, is it ready to be containerized? Is the ecosystem ready for that? Or are you crossing the streams and bringing together two projects that you'll get the worst of all possible worlds instead of the best? But we'll see. So let's see. So first thing I want to do is I want to change the browser that I'm using. Okay, that's right. That's the right one. I want to make sure that I'm not using the wrong browser. Okay, great. Yep. So hey, I have some followers. My goodness, what's happening here? On Twitch. So Vinyl Spartan, thanks for following me. Sierra Adams, thanks for following me. And hope it's entertaining, or at least not a train wreck. And welcome. So let's see. I am going to transition back to this, and let's get this page up. Okay, this is the page I found the other day. Let's make sure that I'm okay. So again, Laravel is not something I've worked with, and I'm not necessarily even recommending using it. It's kind of a, what's it called, a MacGuffin. I think MacGuffin is the term of art used in Hollywood screenwriting. Is like it's the MacGuffin is the plot device that's used to make an excuse for the thing that you're really there to do. What I'm really there to do is to chat with you all, and also to practice myself doing Kubernetes and CNCF related stuff, DevOpsy stuff, and have fun with it. So it's a means to an end. However, I do have a client who's actually interested in working with this, so it does have that as a incentive as well. So I'm actually kind of evaluating how much effort it's going to be for me to actually configure a Laravel in the way that the client wants. So this is useful for me as like a freelancer to understand what am I what am I getting myself into? Okay, so let's go through this article a little bit. So the TLDR is, in this article, you will learn the basics of how to deploy a Laravel application in Kubernetes. And shout out to, let's put his name and picture right up there, Keith. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, Keith. Keith Mifsud. Don't know them, but I'm indebted to them. Thanks, Keith, for writing this article. As I said, this is from May 2020, so we'll see if this still works, and see how far we get. Okay. In this article, you will learn the basics of how to deploy a Laravel application in Kubernetes. Laravel is an excellent framework for developing PHP applications. Whether you need to prototype a new idea, develop an MVP, minimum viable product, or release a full-fledged enterprise system, Laravel facilitates all of the development tasks and workflows. So How you deal with deploying the application is a different story. Okay, Vagrant is an excellent choice for set up a development environment. I agree. I love Vagrant. I've loved it for 12 years. I first saw it at DevOps Days, demonstrated in a lightning round, I think in 2011. So wow, Vagrant has been great for me to be able to. Basically, Vagrant is a virtual machine configuration management application, and it's real. For me, the most useful aspect of it is that it uses a Turing complete, a true programming language to configure it. And that language is Ruby. It doesn't really matter that it's Ruby versus Python or something else. It's just that it has a mainstream programming language that is used to define your virtual machines, configure them, and it's a very featureful piece of glue to manage, like a glue application that weaves together all the necessary things to create environments on your machines. Very useful. It has been very useful for eliminating variables. So if you give a Vagrant file, which is again a Ruby program, but very very narrowly scoped Ruby program, which is its configuration file. If you give someone a Vagrant file, if you run Vagrant up, the command Vagrant up in the directory that has that Vagrant file, they will get the same configuration that anyone gets with that same Vagrant file. There are, of course, there's always edge cases. If you have to write a good Vagrant file, you can easily write almost like any programming language. You can write bad programs, but if you write it where it's very well written and it has its use cases in mind, you can write something where you can mimic your production and give it to for example, you can mimic production with Vagrant. Obviously, you can lower the resource requirements, but you can mimic productions, networks, OS, packages that are installed in the OS, configuration management, like Ansible, Chef, Puppet, etc., or shell script. You can have all that configured in the Vagrant file. And if you're the sysadmin or the infrastructure guy or gal, gal, or they, I should say, you can have your developers do your QA for you as the infrastructure person. Your developers will always be doing QA for you. Why? Because if you maintain the Vagrant file, you can update the Vagrant file with an idea, with a concept of projecting into the future that this Vagrant file represents your future state, the future state of your infrastructure. Or you could have several ones. You could have a Vagrant file that's for current state. So you need to do some troubleshooting in current production. Update your Vagrant file to mimic current production. And then you have your future state, your wish list. Okay, this is going to be what production is going to change to. Let's test your code. Let's test the code. Let's see what breaks. Does anything break as a result of the changes in your infrastructure? That kind of thing. Terraform can also be used that too. It's not an accident, I think, that Terraform came out of HashiCorp, which is Mitchell Hashimoto's was his company. He developed, I think, along with one or two other collaborators, I'm not sure, developed Vagrant. And I think some of the lessons that they got from Vagrant, they funneled into creating Terraform. But it's very useful. However, unfortunately, the license change across the board at HashiCorp, renaming everything to the business, what is it? The BUSL, the new license, that's not an open source license, calls in, including they did that for Terraform and for Console and for their other products, but they also did it for Vagrant, which is not really an enterprise product. I don't know how you'd make big money off of Vagrant, but I feel like it's probably going to kill usage for Vagrant. That's just my opinion. It makes me sad because Vagrant was just so great, and I don't feel like there's yet a adequate replacement for Vagrant. I know that there's projects that are coming up that will make that do things around maintaining development environments and that sort of thing. It's a little different than how you can. It's kind of narrows the scope on what you can do to how do I say it? Like actually have development and operations more smoothly coordinate between each other through the configuration of the infrastructure. I think. I know there's a lot of projects doing that, and I'm definitely like I need to keep diving into those projects. But Vagrant was is great. However, luckily, back to Laravel. So this is my stream, so I can go on some tangents. They mention Vagrant. They say Vagrant is an excellent choice to set up a development environment that mirrors your production environment, but it's still limited to a single machine. That's also not true about Vagrant. You can actually use Vagrant to instantiate hosts on the cloud providers, and it's not the best use of Vagrant. That's when you want to use something like Terraform. But you can use it with a cloud provider. It's not limited in that way. I don't even think it was limited that way in 2020, but I'm not. But in any case, let's move on. In production, you'll most likely require more than just one web server and database, and you probably don't have a single app, but multiple apps with different concerns, such as an API, a front end, workers to process batch jobs, etc. How do you deploy your apps and make sure that they can scale efficiently with your users? In this article, you will learn how to set up a Laravel application in Kubernetes. Okay, Kubernetes, why and what? Okay, this is a little bit of background. I'm not sure that we need Kubernetes is an open source tool that was initially born from Google to facilitate a large number of deployments across their infrastructure. It was basically made to manage resources. So when you're a Google-sized company, managing resources is very difficult. Managing compute resources is very difficult. And you need to do things where you're not having to care. It takes the DevOps concepts, which at Google, the DevOps concepts were evolved into site reliability engineering. You need to take those concepts to the nth degree because you need to make sure that you're not making pets, you're doing cattle, meaning you're able to treat your servers as ephemeral and throwaway. You should not have to worry about configuring a server for anything more than the very short lifetime. So Kubernetes came out of the Borg project, et cetera, et cetera. So running any type of app, not just PHP, it's good at scheduling deployments across several servers, being programmable. All right. So you can run on several cloud hosting providers. In this tutorial, you will run this application on Minikube, a tool that makes it easier to run Kubernetes locally. And just so you guys can follow along, I'm going to put this into the chats. Actually have it pasted into the and it goes into like this tutorial. You'll run the application Minikube, a tool that makes it easier to run Kubernetes locally. Similar to Vagrant, Minikube is merely a virtual machine that contains a Kubernetes cluster. Okay, just be clear. I don't want to have anybody flaming me for mischaracterizing Vagrant or even mischaracterizing Minikube. Yes, those are the primary. That's the primary configuration, the default configurations for both of those. However, both can do other things besides making virtual machines. You could use Minikube to make a containerized cluster. You can also use Vagrant to make containers, use Docker, use cloud providers, blah blah blah. Okay, so So Keith prepared a simple Laravel application, which you can clone from the repository on GitHub. It's nothing more than a fresh Laravel installation. Therefore, you can follow this tutorial using either the demo application or you can create a new Laravel application. Let's get started by cloning the project. So let's get started. So I'm not sure the best way to flip back and forth, but I'm just going to flip back and forth right now in OBS. Hey, if anybody's watching, if you need me to flip back when I keep talking and it seems like I'm referencing things that you don't see, definitely let me know in the chat. Okay, so I suppose I could. Nah, I just want to make. I'm going to be working the terminal. I want you guys to see me doing stuff in the terminal as well. So let's transition back here. So in the terminal, I'm going to make a new instance. So I'm using tmux, by the way. I accidentally used that Arch meme. I'm using tmux, by the way. Okay, I like tmux. It's a terminal multiplexer. You don't have to. It's done. It makes virtual terminals. It's very nice. I've customized it. If anybody wants to see how I've customized it and made all these nice elements on it, I'm happy to do that. So I'm just going to check in real quick on the stream. Want to see that everything's healthy. Looks like it. Excellent connection. Very good, very good. And great. All right, things look good. Thank you. Sorry, just want to check on the health of the stream, see if I've missed any messages. Take a sip of cappuccino, and let's see. Okay, so we're in the terminal, and we're going to start to do some copy pasta from this page. So let's first do a git clone, as it says. Okay. Actually, take that back. Let me get rid of that. Yep. I actually want to put this into a projects directory. Git repos, projects, external. I think I have external. Now let's do external. So let's go ahead and put that in there. Okay, great. All right, so we're in there. Let's take a look what's in there. Okay. And let me just do a git log. Let's see when the last time this thing was updated. 2020. Okay, so this is an ancient repo. So maybe things will be busticated. We'll see if they are busticated. And let me make sure that, okay, so then we cd into, oh, we're already in that directory, duh. Okay, so let's go back to, the demo, or the web page with the demo. Okay, it says I need Docker, kube control, and minikube. So I don't have Docker. I'm going to use Podman. Podman's supposed to be for most purposes, a drop-in replacement for Docker. And we're not having trouble installing and running these applications on Windows since I'm on Gen 2 Linux. So that's great. Okay, so this is going to have it has some background. This is a tutorial about, making a container. So we're going to see how far we get with this. We may not get that far. Yeah, I don't want to put this up at a registry. Put the app key in there. I think that Minikube actually has facilities for creating a local Docker or a local container registry. Maybe something that we could explore with this. Let's see. Let's see how we can do that. So, and actually, I'm going to make sure that I note that down. So I want to use I want to use some kind of local registry instead of public registry. All right, I just want to look ahead a little bit. And I don't think I'm going to create the dashboard since we have K9S and we also have Grafana and Prometheus running. I just want to look ahead a little bit more. Okay. Let's go back up to where we start the registry. So I'm going to make a little bit I don't really like that this uses Apache. I wouldn't necessarily use Apache for this. I'd really rather use Nginx. But when in Rome, let's see if we already have a Docker file in here. I think we do. Does that have all this stuff? Yes, it does. Let me just check to see that it's here. Let me sorry, let me switch over back to the terminal. So we see here it does have a Docker file, but let me see, does that actually match? Does that actually match the what we see here? Looks like it's a little different. No, I guess it is the same. Okay. Okay, with the Docker file, let me transition back to terminal. Actually, do something in OBS. I want to actually there we go. All right, that makes things a little easier. Okay, what I'm going to do is I want to look and see back on the Minikube documentation. See if I still have a tab for that. Yes, so I want to see, can I make a registry? Hmm. Interesting. Okay. I don't want to use, I don't, let's see if I want to use private registry. No, I don't want to, I want to use a non-public registry. This is fun. Quick guide configuring Minikube and Docker on Mac OS. I don't care if it's Mac OS. Usually if it works on Mac OS, it'll work on Linux. Enabling Docker to push images to Minikube's registry. So let's do that. Let's see what we can do here. So Minikube add-ons enable registry. Let's go back to okay. I think that's it. Yep, let's see. This may not actually be what I want. Yeah, this is a strange setup because it implies that you have a Docker host. I don't want to have a Docker host. I just want to have an image registry. I don't want to have to make a socket just to facilitate communication. Wow, I just want this. I don't want that fragility. So let's go to start page. Let's see if I want to do Minikube local container registry without Docker. Let's check this one out. I should have the browser up. Sorry, guys. Okay, what am I looking at here? So I'm on share your local Podman images with the Kubernetes cluster. That's pretty much what I want to do, I think. So as developers, we constantly improve and refine our applications. One of the challenges we face. So thank you, Florent Benoit. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. As developers, but thank you for making this article. As developers, we constantly improve and refine our applications. One of the challenges we face is quickly iterating when working with container images and Kubernetes deployment pods and deployments and pods. Sounds good so far. For example, when we want to try a new image in Kubernetes in a Kubernetes pod, this image needs to be available in a private/public registry or on the nodes of the Kubernetes cluster. Sometimes we need to call extra commands such as kind load docker image or minikube cache add image, or publish the image first to a third-party registry. You'll agree that trying out a new image in a Kubernetes pod should be as seamless as building the image itself. It's a double-edged sword. I wonder if sometimes it can be quite convoluted to build a container. But I agree. If that is already simplified, then trying out a new image should also be simple. In this blog post, we will explore the best practice for streamlining the image iteration process in Kubernetes with Podman Desktop. Now, I'm not using Podman Desktop. I don't want to use Podman Desktop, but so it has a link. The article has a link, and let me just do a quick look through here. I mean, I could use Podman Desktop, but I would really rather not. I'd really rather that Minikube, or at least services managed by Minikube, would actually create a registry, and I could just push images to that, and it doesn't need a really bloated desktop application, a non-Unix-like application to just sit there doing nothing but serving images, but using up lots of resources. So it's possible I'm being worrying about performance too much, but I already have a lot running on my machine. And if you're running a lot on your machine, you don't want to add another bloated app if you can help it. Okay, so let's see what this, it says Minikube published 8 ways of doing that. Well, isn't that nice? Let's take a look at that. So, comparing 8 ways to push your image into a Minikube cluster. Okay. So isn't that interesting? I jumped ahead in the Minikube documentation and I skipped this. So pushing images is here, registries is here. So this is what I really wanted, pushing images. That happens a lot when you're actually creating projects or you're working through things, is that you realize like, hey, you know, especially, so if you're a senior or senior, you often find that the shortcuts you try to make early hurt you in the long run. So you try to optimize for speed and you end up doing the exact opposite of you end up using a ton more time just backtracking, figuring out where you went wrong, when you should have just probably stepped through more carefully the earlier steps. It's kind of the rule of thumb of, you know, the measure twice and cut once approach. Now it's interesting that you don't want to do too much design up front. You want to do just enough, but that's not the same as like figuring out a system, like going through and figuring out a system. That's true at software development, at least in terms of coding, that you want to keep things. You want to go. You don't want to design your entire software system up front. You want to iterate quickly, like just do the basic minimum and then iterate quickly. But when you're configuring infrastructure, you don't necessarily want to do that. You want to understand more fundamentals, and so you don't want to rush through the documentation. Now, admittedly, there's just tons of documentation. All the systems that are modern systems have, there's just so many knobs to potentially adjust. There's so many configuration options that it's just an ordinary human mind just can't keep it all in scope. So there's a lot to go through. That's true. But if you're patient with yourself and you focus on fundamentals, you'll often find that things overall go faster, even if it seems like it's taking a long time at the beginning. Okay. All right, so there's these comparison table for different methods. The best method to push your image to Minikube depends on the container runtime you built your cluster with. The default is Docker. Here is the comparison table to help you choose. So I guess we actually use Docker. I think if that's the default in Minikube, I think that we did that. So we're not using, so interesting that it has, yeah, we haven't switched over to container D as far as I know. Maybe that was something we should do. Minikube SSH. Performance is the best. Let's see what this says. So Minikube. All right, let's do it. I see why. I just wanted to see what that printed. Oh, sorry guys, I'm not switching over. All right. So I just ran Minikube Docker and env. So now I'm going to do eval, like it says in the documentation. That's interesting. Oh, no, the wrong command. So the dangers of command history. There is no Docker in. Is that true? Ah, I see. That's just establish the environment. So let's do podman ps. And let's do, I think I have Docker the, yes. Let's do ps. Oh, look at that. Okay, so it is running the Docker. Wait a minute. Okay, I see. So that's it's exposing the containers that are being run on the Kubernetes instance inside the inside Minikube. So we do have Docker running there. So then you can run docker build t my image, and it's instantly available to the Kubernetes cluster. So let's see if we can do that. Okay, so this is what I'm seeing here. So you can build against the Docker. So once you run this command, which I did, you can any Docker command you run in this terminal run against the Docker inside the Minikube cluster. I want to try something else. I want to try something. So in theory, oops, let's do alias Docker. No, there's no Docker. Okay, so I kind of forget about the shell precedence, but I want to alias Docker equals podman. Okay, so if I do Docker, yeah, okay, great. So the alias works. So let's do Docker ps. Docker ps. Interesting. So that's not happening. So if I do that eval, I want to see that. So I think this, can I do a podman env? Yes. Yeah. But I should be able to use it. I'm frustrated with this setup, so I want to see, can I actually just trick the system to do the thing I want it to do? So how am I going to do that? So what I want to do, I think that all these variables show up. I think they all have podman equivalents. So I can do podman underscore TLS underscore verify. Let's try it. So, but let me just do a quick search here. Hmm. Okay, sorry. So, think that Podman doesn't emulate everything about Docker. It just has sort of an idea of a wrapper to emulate some things about the Docker CLI, but some of the API stuff is not going to be implemented in Podman. So, may just have to continue to use Docker for this. Um, so I'm going to remove that alias. Anybody remember offhand how to delete an alias in Bash? Let's see. So there we go. Docker. There we go. So now it should be Docker PS. Yay. Okay, great. Um, all right, so that little tangent, we're going to go back to yeah, so we're going to build it with Docker on my host. We're going to continue with this. So, okay, wow, that was a long tangent. All right, so we have pretty much configured just need to keep this in mind. We have, that this is only for my local environment, my local shell environment. As soon as I unset this, or I use a new terminal, I have to keep doing this eval minikube docker env. And I'm just interested in seeing like, okay, the third one is for Podman, and they use cryo. Kind of stinks that you'd have to use cryo just because you use Podman. I would hope that you could just use containerd, but hey, it seems like that's a mini. I mean, obviously this is just what Minikube would support. You can use Podman with other container interfaces. So, all right, so in cluster registry add-on. So you could do this too, pushing to an in-cluster registry. Interesting. So maybe I could actually do that with Podman because these commands I think are available in Podman. Podman build, Podman push. I think they're there. These are always fun decisions. How is 8 different than the first one? Minikube image build t my image dot. So this one, so the first one, Docker M, but how is that different than 8? Well, that's interesting. Maybe that would work too. Okay. All right. So we have these options. I'm going to leave that tab open. Let's go back to okay. So let's go back to Laravel, which is where we started or where we were beginning. So we've got this Docker file. We've already got the Docker file. So this is already in that. We checked out the repository. We have this Docker file. So let's build it. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the terminal. Just for the heck of it, I'm going to try this with Podman. Just for the heck of it. And I'm going to do the alias. So I'm going to do the alias again. Okay, there we go. What the heck? So Docker. Oh crap. Podman. Let's just make sure. Okay, great. So this is actually Podman. So let's do it. Let's see. Docker build. Oh, honestly, we're not in the right directory. So I'm gonna have to do that eval. Okay, great. I'm also gonna have to do that alias here. Just test it again. Okay, great. And all right, so I should be able to do this. Let's see what breaks. It's exciting. Sure, let's do the Docker one. Oh. All right, let's try it again. Let's do from Quay. Oh, not found. Okay, let's try from Fedora. Manifest unknown. I bet this, again, this is an ancient project. I bet it is too old, this composer. So let's try this. Actually, hold on a second. Let's update the Docker file. Okay. So instead of composer 165 as build, let's try latest. This is probably going to make a very busted setup. But I just want to see, hey, maybe even composer doesn't exist anymore. And honestly, I've never been able to really figure out the best way to find images on these hosts that are active. Like, but let's see. Hey, look at that. I bet this is not going to work with whatever's whatever else is depending on this. It's Composer 2. Some of your plugins seem to be incompatible. I bet that there is a okay, let's try this. Let's do Docker file. Let's do one. Do that. Okay, let's go back to browser. All right, so I'm on the Docker Hub and I'm looking for Composer. And what do we see? We see Composer is a dependency manager written in M4 PHP. So just FYI again, I am not haven't been in the PHP universe for a long time. Uh, apparently there, I think I do remember something about Composer. So Composer is kind of a package manager or dependency manager, sorry, dependency manager for PHP. So makes sense that that has been continued, has continued to be updated. Okay, so they have supported tags. Okay, so that's the old, this is the legacy for, interesting, I did put one on there and one didn't show up. All right, I want to see. So let's try 110. What the heck? So I can never remember, like, so can we actually specify wildcard? So Docker file from wildcard. It has a tag. Oh, it's 10. Oops. All right, let's see. Just needed to see how I could do it. I want to force getting rid of the cache. All right, let's look at this Docker file. Guess it wants to be specific. So let's do 1 to 10 to 27. Doesn't that tag work? Something's up with this cache. I'm just gonna zap my cache. There we go. Let's try a different registry. Oh. The heck? Can't specify the tags? There it is. So I'm just looking on the Docker Hub and I see there's the tag 2. I should be able to just Docker pull composer 2. I should be able to do that with 1 as well. Docker pull composer 1. Why is it not showing up? Composer 1, Composer 1. Manifest unknown. The heck? I have a feeling there's something I am missing about how the registries resolve tags, or how Docker resolves tags. Could be that too. Could be also podman. So let's get rid of podman. So let's do unalias Docker. Okay, Docker help podman should be no more. Right. Okay, great. So let's do this now. Fantastic. So it's just a podman issue. So just to review, since I didn't move over, did a Docker, I did unaliased podman, Docker build, T Laravel Kubernetes Devo dot, it's building. So, oh, do we have errors? Sweet. Canceled. Let's try that again. Canceled. Let's see. So what are these? So problem one. Let's go with always start with the top problem. Installation request for doctrine inflector. Satisfied by doctrine inflector. It requires PHP 7.1. Your PHP version 8.4.3 does not satisfy the requirement. So why do we have PHP 8.4.3? Let's check the Docker file. It says from PHP 7.1.8. So why is that? Why is it happening like that? Interesting. I wonder how it's actually starting to install 8. Very interesting. Well, that's interesting that it would install 843. I wonder if there is something in the um, something in Composer. If we got PHP CLI, let's see. So I'm looking at the packages that are part of Composer, trying to just see if there's something that tells me right off the bat that there is PHP version requirement that's loose that allows PHP 8. It's possible my knowledge of PHP is so dated that now PHP 7 has been completely deprecated and cannot be used anymore. So let's check that out. How about that? PHP Composer version 7 PHP support. Alrighty, well, we're about 15 minutes away from the end of the live stream um, that as scheduled. So I think I'm going to stop here. At least we demonstrated some Minikube stuff, and we had some. And I got my first 2 visitors from Twitch, so that's fantastic. Hi again to Sierra Adams, and I think we also got another follower. So Final Spartan, very good. So my hope for these live streams is that I find my people. So people who are interested in technology and computing, even things like, these Raspberry Pi things. If you're interested in this stuff and you're interested in maybe talking about workers' cooperatives, as well as talking about, like, I had a really fun time my summer reading. Actually, it took a lot longer to read than just the summer, but I read Marx's Capital Volume 1, and wow, it was including the footnotes. Super important to read the footnotes. That's where a lot of Marx's, I found out, or a lot of his humor is. He's actually kind of funny, and very sarcastic. You could imagine, since he's defining, he's actually describing in a scientific way what capitalism actually is. But hey, I'd love to find my people who are like not completely wrapped up in only the text, but live their lives. I think one of the things that seems very clear is that the people who need to understand how capitalism works the most are people who work for a living. People who work for a living, you need to understand what the social contract actually is. That's why it's partially why it's called socialism, because it's more about the social relations rather than some kind of abstraction that has no direct meaning on human life. So it was a really fun read. I'd love to meet. Hey, if you're a engineer, the computer engineer especially, but hey, any engineer, or if you're just a smart person, interested, curious person, you're just interested in like learning more about, or talking with someone else who has read Marx, but also is interested in learning more about economics, because economics is really about our lives. Economics is about like how we actually work together or don't to create society, and whether a society is a predatory or cooperative enterprise. So yeah, one of the things I'll say that when you read Capital Volume 1, you realize what a ripoff it is, and how much is being taken from you in a wage construct. And it's important, like, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to have a job or don't want a job or I can't do a good job when I'm paid. It just means, you need to know your worth, and you need to know what people are getting out of you. It's a very valuable thing to understand in all kinds of aspects of capitalist life, our life under capitalism. So in any case, I think I'm going to close out the stream. Really appreciate folks who have seen it live, and I'm also going to have this shared. This is going to be a live stream, so it's not going to be worth watching 2 hours worth of it. Hopefully I can, this is also learning for me, a lot of learning, a lot of good stuff. See if I can make some clips from this, see how useful it is for people after the fact. So in any case, hope you all stay well, stay safe, and I will be back. I think my next schedule is on Sunday, so Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And I really appreciate your interest and your curiosity. So thanks. And hey, why don't I do this? Let's put me back instead of me being on the terminal. So thanks again. Still getting used to this, and being your own director in the media sense. It can be fun, and it can be a little nerve-wracking, since it's the paradox of control. It's like, yes, you get control, but now you have responsibility. So, all right, take care.